From Bishop Ireton High School, it's Real World Wednesdays, a show featuring alumni and friends of the school for the Cardinal community and beyond. I'm Ryan Fannin, Associate Director of Advancement and a member of the BI class of 1989. And on the show today is Broadway actor Jake Odmark, class of 2004, who got his start in theater in the spring of his senior year at Bishop Ireton on the stage of Garwood Whaley Auditorium. If someone wants to pursue a career acting on stage, most would say that the pinnacle of success would be appearing in a Broadway production. Performing on the Great White Way in New York City is a pipe dream for many. To make it in New York City theater, you have to have the combination of talent, charisma, and an unrelenting determination to succeed. For Jake Odmark, Bishop Ireton class of 2004, he just so happens to have all three. Jake and his twin brother Josh originally came to Bishop Ireton to perform in the renowned wind ensemble under Dr. Garwood Whaley. While at BI, Jake was involved in a number of different activities, including playing football for 3 years, but his focus remained on music. When he decided to audition for Godspell during his senior year, he simply wanted to try something new. What he didn't know at the time was that performance would not only earn him the first accolades of his theatrical career and an award for his role as John the Baptist in Judas, it would also change the trajectory of his life. Following graduation from Bishop Ireton in 2004, Jake attended James Madison University. There, he still planned to pursue a career in music. But after just a little time, he changed his major to voice, intending to go all in for a career in theater. He saw success pretty quickly with lead roles at JMU and soon began booking professional work at Toby's Dinner Theater in Columbia, Maryland. The relationships he made there and his growing talent led to national and international tours before he ever donned a cap and gown in Harrisonburg. Despite delaying his graduation for those tours, he did receive his degree from James Madison in 2009. He appeared in several professional DC productions before moving to New York. There, he would spend the better part of 2 years living on mostly rice and beans, going to audition after audition and earning money any way he could. Then, unexpectedly, 6 months after an audition he had forgotten about, he got a call from his agent with an offer to be a vacation swing in the Broadway musical Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark. His hustle paid off, and he turned that initial 2-week contract into a year and a half in the show, including performances in the lead role. From there, he appeared in 3 more Broadway productions before the pandemic brought Broadway to a grinding halt in March 2020. Suddenly, he was back to square one with no acting roles in sight. Then in 2024, he got a message from the writer of the musical Shucked, who asked him if he wanted to be part of the first national tour of the Tony-nominated show. Jake jumped at the chance and is now touring around the country, starring as Bo, one of the male leads in that show. But to understand how Jake got this far, you have to go back to the very beginning, where he attributes much of his success to the influence of his family and his musically gifted parents.
Both of my parents are musicians, instrumentalists even. You know, my dad plays French horn at the Kennedy Center. He's played for 53 years now. He joined a year after they opened, and he's still the oldest member there. He's still there. He's probably going to retire this summer, but he's still there, so I'm still used to. He's at the Kennedy Center probably right now. My mom's a band director for 30 years in Fairfax County, and so growing up, she was my piano teacher, and he was my trumpet teacher, and that was it. It was just music, music, music. I would do, music flashcards when I was 5 years old. I could name all the time signatures and key signatures, and I was just ingrained in that world. And I didn't think it was weird. It was just like kind of commonplace in my house. And so when I got to choosing high schools, Ireton was never in doubt. Like I never had a choice really. Everyone was like, you're going to Ireton. If you can get into Ireton, you're going to Ireton because of the wind ensemble. It was like world renowned. My dad was in the Army band with Dr. Whaley, who was still here at the time. And so I knew of who he was. He was kind of a family friend. And so we got in, and Josh and I were first chair trumpet and first chair trombone, basically all 4 years that we were here under Dr. Whaley. He retired my junior year. So I did have 1 year with Dr. Isles. It was just unbelievable. I mean, Dr. Whaley was the biggest influence on on where I am now. I mean, I know he was the band director, but just the musicianship and the way he walked the line between friendship and authority. Like everybody wanted to be his best friend and also feared him. He was just like, because he was just so good at what he did. And I think it just instilled the skills that I use, every day on Broadway.
You talked about growing up. You attended St. Agnes in Arlington. What do you remember about the time there?
I love St. Agnes. We had 18 kids in my graduating class, so I can name all of them basically. And a lot of them have shown up on this tour. I've seen them at the stage doors. All of a sudden, there's a family friend that I grew up with. But it was 2 blocks from my house. I used to walk to school. In fact, actually, no, we'd usually have to be driven because we'd sleep too late, and we'd go at like 7:59 for an 8 o'clock class. I love St. Agnes. I loved it so much. That's where I first picked up the horn under Marge Herbert, Mrs. Herbert. That she was my first band teacher, and again, a family friend of my mom's because fellow band teachers. And I did the talent show, and I did my first kind of bit of theater when the whole 6th grade had to do A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was Puck, and I had to put on a dress, and I just, I explored everything at St. Agnes. I got to do sports, I got to do music, I got to do academics. I have lifelong friends from that community.
You shared about Ireton, how that was going to be the choice, but tell us about your siblings and how not all of them came to Ireton. So how did that all play in with sort of the decision for everybody?
Yeah, so Josh and I came here, and my little sister came here for 1 year, but my little sister's a ballerina. She dropped out of school in 4th grade and danced professionally. She did decide to go to high school, and then after 1 year, it was too much with dance, so she dropped back out. But she did attend here for 1 year, but she danced professionally until she was in her 30s. She just recently retired. So she had an amazing time here as well. Allison, my older sister, went to O'Connell. She's the one black sheep. And I think it was more of it was convenient for her as the first child to like make her own decisions. I think she wanted to rebel against that. Once she saw the rest of our siblings going here and seeing how good we were and the wind ensemble and everything, I know she was quite jealous about that. But I think it's healthy to have a little bit of family rivalry. We had Cardinals versus Knights growing up all the time. She was the only Knight.
Rivalry is still going strong all these years later. Now let's shift to those high school days. Mm-hmm. You come to Bishop Ireton for the first time. What's the first thing you remember? What stands out to you from that first fall on Cambridge Road?
Well, the first thing ever at Ireton was basketball tryouts in the spring before when I was in 8th grade. And I showed up with my brother, and we had like spring drills for basketball, which wouldn't happen for a year, which is crazy. And I was so intimidated. I met one of my lifelong friends who's still one of my best friends today, Phil Caron. And he came up to Josh and I, and we were standing there at basketball, and we knew each other, obviously. And he didn't know who we were, and we don't really look alike. And so he said, hey, so do you guys know each other? And we like went, ha, 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 yeah, we're twins. And he was like, oh, well, I how would I supposed to know? And that's his story that he always says. We were the only people that we knew, so we hung out together, and we were intimidated. Everybody was so big and athletic, and I feel like I probably hadn't even hit puberty yet. So I was intimidated. High school is an intimidating thing. But in the fall, I joined football for the first time. I was scared to death. I rode the bench. I was on the freshman team and the JV, team backups, basically. And I was just marveling at the size and speed of full-grown men for the first time. I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm in high school. But I had an amazing time. Right from the get-go, I just felt like I fit in here. The teachers, the community, the music program, I just felt like for the first time, at St. Agnes, you're still kind of like butting into who you are as a human. And at Ireton, I felt like now I know who I am, and I'm finding my footing with like the right people.
Now, I know you're involved in quite a few different things, as you just mentioned, and we're going to get to perhaps the most influential one in just a moment. But before you considered auditioning for one of the theater productions, tell us a little bit more about the athletic side and the Bishop Ireton music program.
Yeah, well, that's a great thing about Ireton's. The music program's so strong, but so is the athletics. I mean, academics, everything. It was like such a badge of honor to go here. I wanted to play football because I knew I just wanted to tough it out and try it. I was, like I said, I was pretty scared to death all 3 years. I played 3 out of the 4 years I played football. I was the quarterback for the JV team, and I was the backup quarterback on varsity for a year. I think I played one game. So it was pretty cool to be like first chair trumpet and the quarterback of the high school team. But I'd never done any theater, and so I felt like by senior year, I just felt like there was one kind of like group that I hadn't cracked my way into, and it was the theater community. I knew a lot of them because a lot of them were in the band or in classes with me. It's a pretty small school, but I just had never done anything like that, and I was intrigued. So second semester senior year, I found myself thinking maybe I'll audition for Godspell, which was the one musical I had ever seen. I really think it's kind of one of those like perfect chance type of things. If it was a show that I didn't know, I probably wouldn't have auditioned. But I happened to have seen a production of it at a dinner theater about 5-6 years earlier, and I thought, oh, I know that show. That was fun. Okay, I'll try out.
And when you had that opportunity for Godspell, tell us about the roles of John the Baptist and Judas. It was your first time in theater production at Bishop Ireton, and maybe expand a little bit about what prompted you to do that audition. Was it sort of like, as you describe your life, it's almost like this was something that was going to happen, but in a way, you did a lot of other things before you got to this moment.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I think there was a little bit of a social aspect. There were some people that I wanted to do it because they were going to audition, so I wanted to fit in. But I also knew that I could carry a tune. Like, I was a musician. I knew that I could at least sing on pitch. I never tried to sing other than that, but I thought, there's not very many guys here. Like, I know that show. Like, why not? I was kind of like, I'd done everything else here. And like I said, I was that super confident senior, second semester. I was like, why not? What's there to lose, And I remember I got up there and then immediately I started shaking. I was very nervous for my audition. I sang Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra, which has nothing to do or anything close to musical theater, but it was the one song that I knew I could sing. And I remember getting up there and Chris Tomasino, our music director, I went like this. I went, fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what Jupiter. I sang the entire verse without breathing and no vibrato at all, just right through like a trumpet player would, right? No. And I remember I stopped and he goes, did you breathe? And I said, sorry, I didn't have to. I'm used to playing trumpet, so singing was really easy. And he goes, well, that's impressive. How would you put some vibrato in? And I said, I don't have that. Which, back then I thought, as an instrumentalist, you either you added vibrato, you shook the horn, or you did something with your lips. And as a singer, I heard so many people, friends, artists had this beautiful vibrato, and I just thought, I don't have it. And I remember standing and looking him down the eye and saying, I don't have it. And he goes, can you mimic an opera singer? And I went, and he was like, that's vibrato. And so right then I was like, wow, I'm learning something. So yeah, I was very scared, but I basically just wanted to do it because everybody else was. And then the next day I had one of the leads in the show, and a lot of my friends who I wanted to be in the show with me didn't get in. So I was like, now I'm roped in here.
All right, we're going to have some fun with this next one.
Alrighty.
We dug through the archives and found a few reviews of your performance in the show, which ultimately won you a Cappy Award for Featured Actor in a Musical in 2004, which were published in the Washington Post. Jake Odmark is not only an accomplished actor, but also a strong singer. His energy, vocal ability, and entrancing acting were put to good use. And in another review, though he had difficulties with his microphone, Odmark successfully demonstrated his dramatic and vocal talents. When you hear those now, does that spark memories of that show in a huge way? What do you remember as you expand on telling us about that production, which was also nominated for Best Musical in 2004.
Man, it makes me kind of emotional because I actually remember those reviews because it was the first time I've ever been reviewed. And so I read those and I remembered like how much it meant to me to feel that because I was nervous. I didn't know anything. I felt like all the other kids in the show were better than me. They knew what they were doing. They had done theater all 4 years. I was in it with Beth Rothschild, one of the best voices I've heard in my life. And I was like, how am I going to stand up next to her? So to see that like from, an outside source, it it gave me so much confidence, obviously. But I remember significantly that first review that you read. I was like, oh wow, this rings a bell. I remember reading that, and I think I probably just like read it over and over and over and over. It makes me emotional because I feel like before then I was good at music, but I didn't necessarily feel like it was my calling. And when I did theater for the first time, even though I didn't think I was good at it yet, I felt at home with the people, and I felt like it felt like very much like where I should be, belong. And I think that's why I switched my major a year later at JMU. Like all these things went back to that feeling of community and kind of home. And those reviews really brought that up. Wow.
That's where I want to go next, because you graduate in 2004 and now you head down I-81 South to Harrisonburg attend James Madison University. What was the decision like to attend JMU? I know your major was musical theater, but if I understand correctly, as you just elaborated on a little bit, you initially went to school there to study something else. Can you talk about everything that went into those decisions?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I'm coming out of the Bishop Ireton Wind Ensemble. I'm one of the best trumpet players in the state, and I'm really confident with that. And my dad's a French horn player, and I'm thinking, well, I got to go play trumpet. And JMU had the best music school in the state, and I just thought, well, it's natural. I got to go to JMU and play trumpet. And I didn't really think about theater because it was so new. And I got to JMU, and I immediately joined the music program. I was a trumpet major. I had a private practice with the trumpet teachers there. I was the first freshman to get on the front line of the MRDs, the marching band there, which is one of the best in the country. And I'm there, and I'm playing trumpet, and I'm doing my thing. And it's just something in the back of my head was thinking, this isn't it. This isn't it. And I think it was the feeling that I had in Godspell. And that summer before college, I did this. A lot of the Godspell cast went and did a community theater production of Singing in the Rain, and I got to do that with them too. And so I had 2 musicals under my belt, and I had so much fun, and I felt like I learned so much. And I thought, I think I got to do that. And I remember very, very clearly coming home after freshman year, first semester, and telling my 2 classically trained instrumentalist parents, I'm going to switch my major to voice, which is about the hardest thing you can tell to instrumentalists. I remember they said, voice, the fake instrument. I was the black sheep of the family. I was the first one to do that. And I just said, and they said, what do you think you want to do? And I said, I think I want to try and be, an actor, be on Broadway. They were a bit skeptical, but, they supported it. And I never looked back. The next semester I switched to voice. So I wasn't a musical theater major. I was a voice major, but in the concentration of music theater. But at JMU, they have a music school and a theater school. I was in the music school still. And I got there, and I got my first voice lesson at almost 20 years old. And I joined the choir for the first time at 20. And I was in the opera. All of a sudden I was in the magic flute, and I'm like a priest or a guard in the background. Like it was a pretty wild frontier for me. But JMU was an amazing school for me because it was a small program at the time. Now it's absolutely, huge. But back then it was a very small program, liberal arts program, that if it was a bigger program, I wouldn't have gotten in. It's so competitive now. And back then it was easy enough for a guy like me to try and get on stage and learn on his feet. And so fortunately I was able to do student run productions, main stage productions, operas, choir, a cappella, all that stuff. And it really kind of honed my vocal ability and my stage presence. It's again, a perfect storm of events. If any other school, probably wouldn't have happened.
Now, it was also during your college years that you started performing at Toby's Dinner Theater. Tell us about your first experiences there and how that affected sort of your timing of graduation from JMU.
The first time I auditioned for Toby's, I actually said no. And there's a van of JMU kids going up, and I didn't want to go. And our musical theater director basically forced me. I was basically scared. I didn't want to do it. I didn't think that I was good enough. And I didn't feel, I'd a year and a half under my belt of doing any theater at all, and now I'm going to go audition for a professional show? No way. I was very scared. But I got in because everyone else was going, and I went and I auditioned for Grease at Toby's Dinner Theater in 2005. And I sang "Where's the Life That Late I Live" from Kiss Me Kate, which is not exactly Danny or Kaneki from Grease. I did not get called back. I did not hear back, and it was crushing. I did not get in, and it was so devastating. And 2 years later, after my junior year, Toby's was auditioning Grease again. And now I had a couple more years, and I felt confident, and I just really wanted to right that wrong. And I thought, I got to go again. So I went back, and I sang a much more appropriate song, and I got cast as the lead. I got cast as Danny in Grease. So I went from not being called back at the same theater, same show, to the lead in just 2 years. And that led me, I was at Toby's 3 summers in a row, 07, 08, and 09. We did Grease, West Side, and Oklahoma. and I got to play 3 iconic musical theater parts. I played Danny in Grease, and then I played Riff in West Side, and I played Curly in Oklahoma. And I feel like I met all the people, the tons of people that I work with on Broadway today, casting directors, producers, that led me to my first national tour. Everything kind of connected at Toby's Dinner Theater. It's an amazing mecca for talent. My partner that I have today, who's sitting right next to me, she worked at Toby's. There's people on Broadway that come up out of the blue and say, hey, you were at Toby's, right? I mean, Toby's is really, really, Andy Carl, Tony-nominated actor, he worked at Toby's. Edward Norton worked at Toby's. Like, so many people, they underestimate the value of Toby's Dinner Theater in Columbia, Maryland. So definitely, if you're listening to this and you're a singer or actor, go audition, because it's an amazing place.
I'm thinking of our current students here, young alumni, maybe older alumni that are still interested in this career. And I love that analogy when you talked about how 2 years later you went back. Mm-hmm. In an industry where there's naturally a lot of rejection and you need great resiliency, what would be a recommendation, advice you would give about just the fact that it's okay to not get things in life, and it builds character?
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear this from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, this industry is all about rejection. I always tell students 99 out of 100 auditions, you're going to get a no. And if you expect that, then every audition you expect to be a no. So when the yeses come, they're a nice surprise. A lot of people say auditioning is the job and the job is the vacation. And like, I guess you can look at it that way, but like, it's all about the art form, right? If your audition is your chance to perform your art that day, then that's your chance to give your best in your art form. You're not worried about the outcome because you're getting to do your art in that audition, even if it's 5 minutes. And then the other thing that I always say, in an industry full of rejection, you have to worry about yourself and only yourself. I think the biggest enemy that we have today is comparison with social media and the internet and how connected everybody is. If you get rejected from a part, you can immediately go look up who got it. You can go to their Instagram and try and copy everything that they do. And then the next thing you're doing is you're emulating someone else's organic energy as opposed to yours. And so I always tell students, do your best and, be your best and be it, to your greatest ability, and keep honing that no matter what, no matter how many no's, because pretty soon you're going to be the person who gets cast and someone else is trying to emulate you. But no, you can only do you. And I had to learn that the hard way. It's definitely a very hard industry, but if you persevere, it's definitely doable. Just like in any industry, you just got to keep going. And I think it just might be a little bit harder in this one because it's so subjective on you and you putting your vulnerable art on the table and then getting a big X, 99 out of 100 times.
Now, after you graduated from James Madison in 2009, you came back to Northern Virginia area. We won't get into every production you've ever done, but in 2012, you appeared in the first of 2 world premieres I think you've been part of. Really, really at Signature Theater. What was that experience like to bring a character to life for the very first time? And I'm guessing working directly with the writer in addition to the cast members and director.
It was amazing. It was my first play ever, and it was very, very dramatic, very current, very, it was provocative. And a lot of theaters to this day won't do it because of how troublesome the material is. It was a very, very difficult role and play, and we were the first to ever do it. So that is a huge, huge feather in my cap for that. Yes, I got to work with the playwright. He's still a really good friend of mine. And the coolest thing about that was that show broke all the records at Signature Theater, and then it moved to Off-Broadway. It was directed by David Cromer, this huge, huge director in New York now. It had a cast full of TV actors. David Mamet's daughter was the lead in the show. And now it's on bookshelves in every dramatic bookshop everywhere. And on the first page, it says, Davis, original cast, Jake Odmark, which is so cool. And now, to this day, I meet people, students, colleagues that say, oh, yeah, I did this show at Signature. And they say, what? And I go, really, really? And they go, you were in the first ever really, really, it's a kind of a very famous play now. So at the time, it was just another gig. And 12 years later, I'm like, wow, that was really, really special.
Following that production, which I believe was the last time you performed in the DC area until now, we'll come back to that in a moment. You moved to New York. What sort of goals did you have at that time? What sort of expectations did you have that you would be able to meet those goals heading to the Big Apple?
See, at that point, so now my disposition has changed. I have felt like I went from I don't know anything at all my freshman year at JMU to thinking, as long as I keep that kind of greenness and openness to willingness to learn, that's actually going to be an advantage. And so I felt it was actually, I thought it was cool that I didn't know very much. I always thought it was cool that I was a blank slate. And so I was very, very confident. I knew that I could go to New York and I could break in just like I broke in at JMU. I broke in at Toby's Dinner Theater. I broke in the DC area. And then I got to New York, and it took me almost 2 years to have a one single yes. And so it was definitely, a rude awakening from the Big Apple. Yeah, it's a means. You hear how hard it is to make it in New York, and it is very true. But I remember it took me 2 years. I was doing every odd job on the market. I was washing my roommate's clothes. Literally, I would say, "Can you just give me $10 and I'll do your laundry for you?" Like, that's how broke I was. I would walk home. I would walk 70 blocks from Midtown to my apartment home because I couldn't afford $2 to get on the subway. I was so poor because everything was going to rent, and all these little odd jobs, catering and bartending and restaurants. I was doing background work and all these TV shows that would pay you $80 for like 16-hour days, And so, but all the while auditioning. And I remember my first audition in New York, and it was for How to Succeed in Business on Broadway. And I walked in, it was my first Broadway audition, and I sang, and I thought I did well. And the casting director looked up and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "I'm Jake." And she said, "It's going to be really good to get to know you, Jake." And it was a no, but I remember that response and thinking, okay, I got something here, right? If she looked up and thought, who is this new guy? And this is big New York, I know I can do it. 2 years later, I got my first Broadway call, and I never looked back.
So let's talk about that. You get this break, Broadway musical Spider-Man, Turn Off the Dark. What was the experience like getting the offer for the show? And then what was it like on Broadway stage for the first time?
I have the voicemail of my agent calling me and offering me the show. I don't know if it'll pick up on the mic, but we can try and play it. It's a 12-year-old voicemail. Yeah, from 9/24/2012. Let's see if it'll play.
Hey Jake, it's Gary. Give me a ring when you get the message. I'm going to forward an email to you. I just received an offer for you to be the temporary vacation swing in Spider-Man. I will forward this to you, and then call me later. Thanks, bye.
Man, that call, first of all, I was unloading beans into the cabinet. I had literally just beans and rice. That's all I could afford. I'd walked to the Sea-Town. I came back, and I remember putting beans and rice into the cabinet, and my phone rang, and it said Gary, which of course, when your agent calls, you're like, but it had been 2 years. Nothing had ever happened. And plus, my Spider-Man audition was 6 months earlier. So that was not on my radar at all. I had never had a job come that late. I just thought, well, if maybe it's another audition or something. And so I just let it go to voicemail, and I kept unloading my groceries. And then I played it, and I heard him say Spider-Man, but he, as you can hear, he doesn't sound that excited, right? He's just kind of like another job for another actor for him. And I was kind of confused. I was like, is there another Spider-Man, or is this a Broadway show? And I ran to my room and I played it again. And I think I came to, and I woke up all my roommates, and I said, I just got a Broadway show. I just got a Broadway show. I just got a Broadway show. And it was euphoria for a good, I had like 10 days between that call and my first rehearsal. And it was just like so much relief. Honestly, all I wanted, it was a 2-week contract, and all I wanted was that paycheck. I just needed to pay my bills, And that 2-week contract as a vacation swing turned into a year and a half. I never left. How that industry works, you cover somebody who's hurt or on vacation, and then someone else takes a vacation, or someone else gets hurt, or someone, they like what you're doing, they want to keep you in the building. And so I went from a vacation swing to a swing to playing Flash, the bad guy in the show, and then to eventually playing Peter Parker in the show.
Wow. Now, following Spider-Man, you are cast in Kinky Boots as a replacement for the character of Harry and understudying the lead role of Charlie. What was it like coming into such a well-received show that had won 6 Tony Awards, including for Best Musical?
Yeah, it was so cool, especially coming from Spider-Man, which was infamous, right? Everybody wanted to make fun of Spider-Man. Everyone wanted to, who died? What broke tonight? And so now I'm going to the Best Musical, the reigning Best Musical. It just won the Tony. I was playing opposite Billy Porter. I had all these amazing celebrities coming to see the show. I met Oprah, and I met the Obamas and Billy Joel, and I was like, none of those people came to Spider-Man. They all were coming to Kinky Boots. So I was on cloud nine. I couldn't believe that I could actually kind of validate my one Broadway show with a second one. And that one was the longest show that I did on Broadway. I did that for 3 years. I did almost 1,400 performances of Harry in Kinky Boots. I got to play Charlie plenty of times, probably over 100 times. And it was a really cool show. And they stunt casted it. So a lot of celebrities came through. We got to work with Wayne Brady and Brendan Urie from Panic at the Disco, and and we had football players come. Tiki Barber played a role. Kirsten Maldonado from Pentatonics was in the show. So a lot of my idols, a lot of like celebrities I looked up to, were all of a sudden next to me on stage. Like it was absolutely wild.
Now, while you were maintaining this difficult schedule of performing at 8 shows a week in Kinky Boots, I know you dealt with some pretty difficult health issues. I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing with us how you handled that amidst the pressure of performing and how to work through those dynamics every day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone needs to hear the details of Crohn's disease, but it's a brutal one. It came when I was 27 out of nowhere. I felt like I was healthy and happy, and all of a sudden I had the symptoms. Went to the doctor, and I had Crohn's disease, and it led me to a 6-year flare where I was in and out of the hospital. I was on steroids. I was on anti-inflammatories. I had a double blood transfusion before a matinee once, where I woke up to go to the matinee, and my doctor called and said, "You have to go to the hospital right now," because I had less than half the blood in my body. I was very sick. I lost 40 pounds. It was very, very, very hard. I couldn't get to the top of the stairs without feeling lightheaded, so I'd had my dresser bring my costumes to the stage level, so I didn't have to go to my dressing room. So it was a very, very hard time. And at the time, I didn't know. It was very much like, why me? Why is this happening to me? What, poor me, woe is me. And after coming out of it and through that hardship, I just learned the value of adversity and the value of crises, whether it's health or economic or financial or family. Adversity is a gift, and it teaches you who you are, especially as an actor. You talk about building character. This is something that I came out of that a different person than I was before, and I think my career started to blossom in new ways because of that. And not just my career, my relationships, my personal relationship with myself. And I just think that if you are going through something, keep fighting it, persevere, and as opposed to thinking, "Woe is me," and what's the bad luck? Maybe if you can switch that mindset to, "What can I learn from this, and how can I be better from this?" And I think that's going to be the key to eventually moving forward.
Incredible advice you shared there. Now, in 2018, you were cast in another world premiere, the musical version of the acclaimed film Pretty Woman, first in Chicago and then on Broadway. Talk to us about creating a character from the ground up and getting the chance to be part of the original Broadway cast recording.
It's amazing. It's such a privilege. It's so funny because you get to do so much more than you think. You see these productions, you think the director did all that, but it's so much the actors, especially in the beginning, because the director has an idea, but the actors are who just, they're the actual clay. They can mold themselves as well as the director. So an example of that is I played a character named Angel. He's like a street character, he's a drug dealer and all, it's back in the 90s, Pretty Woman in Hollywood. And I wore this big oversized Lakers jersey and big baggy jeans. And I just thought to myself, this guy would have like a rat tail or something like edgy, and there was a girl in our cast who was putting in hair extensions on her lunch break to go to a different audition. And I grabbed one of her hair extensions, clipped it to the back of my head, and I went to the director and I said, "I think Angel needs to have a rat tail." And he goes, "I'll talk to wardrobe and hair." And when we showed up in Chicago, I had a full mullet of a wig that
goodness.
I wore for the entire run. And now there's, multiple productions all over the world. And if you look, there's always a guy with a mullet. And that is because I decided Angel needed to have some crazy long hair. So it's stuff like that. You get to put your actual thumbprints on the actual bones of the musical. And then when it takes off and it becomes like a staple in the canon of musical theater that's done everywhere, you can always say, "That was me. That wasn't somebody else. That was me." And it's really cool to be a part of that.
In 2019, you were cast in your 4th Broadway production, this time a straight play called The Inheritance. You understudied a number of different roles in the play that would go on to win the Tony for Best Play. What did this experience teach you about the necessity of preparation and dedication to your craft?
It's everything. Absolutely everything. When I auditioned, I was in Pretty Woman. I had done Kinky Boots and Spider-Man. So either I was in a mullet, I was in high heels, or I was in a Spidey suit. There's nothing that equated me to this play, which is a very straight play, 7 hours long, epic drama. There's nothing that they would look at me in my career and think this guy's able to do it. And I knew that. And because of that, I never would get in the room for plays like that because they look at my resume and think, "Oh, he's a drag queen, or he's a superhero, or he's this clownish character. Why would he be right for this dramatic role?" And I thought to myself, well, now that I have this appointment, this audition, I have to make a splash. I have to make them remember me. And the way I did that was, this play was 7 hours. It's 2 3.5 hour plays. And I was called in to cover both of the leads, each of which have 3.5 hours of material. And so my audition alone was 64 pages. pages, and I had 2 minutes to go in there and read one of the whatever they asked me to do. But I had 64 pages to pick from, and I thought, well, the only way to make an impression is to memorize it. And so I walked in with nothing in my hands, looking probably like a complete, crazy person. And they walked in, they said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yep." And they're like, "Where's your stuff?" And I just pointed to my head, and they all kind of chuckled like, "Okay, let's see." And then they rapid fire. They said, "Let's start with the second Toby scene. Let's do the first Eric scene. Let's do the Jasper scene. Let's do all these." And I knew him just flat, because I'd spent the week before just absolutely drilling everything. I would run it with people in Pretty Woman. I would run it in the wings. I would run it backstage. I would get on the phone and do it. I would do it on FaceTime. I would record myself doing it. I just was a workhorse, because I knew that even if I didn't get the show, I wanted to make an impression in the audition, so they would remember that guy. And it got me the role, and I think it's a role that I snuck. I don't think that I deserved. I think there were plenty of people with a better resume, or maybe more appropriate for the role, but I did something that no one else did. And so I think that's what you're asking is, it's dedication. It's what can you do to make yourself stand out? Be bold, make mistakes, take risks. I always say I'm a big advocate for rule breaking. It's if you break a rule and it goes the wrong way, you're still remembered. And if you break a rule and it goes the right way, then you might have a big break there. So I think you just got to be bold and do what's coming to you that you think kind of scares you. You should do that. And that's what I say.
Memorization of lines and then development of character. When people first get into this, they sometimes are like, well, I just got to memorize this. But explain a little bit about the memorization part of it and then the development of the character and how they're both equally important, or if one's more important than the other from your perspective.
Well, I think more important would definitely be the character development. There's a lot of people that say don't memorize for auditions, because once you memorize, you kind of lock it in a certain way, and it's hard to unlock that. But again, this was a specific example where I almost wanted to do a party trick. I wanted to do something that no one else did so they could remember me. Because I thought to myself, if they see 100 guys reading these scenes, who's the one person they'll remember? Well, the guy who didn't have any paper in front of him. But as far as then when you get the job, I think it's very important to always have the script and kind of revisit the text all the time and really kind of live with it as long as possible before you memorize it. Because if you memorize it too soon, it's going to be memorized before you learn things. And when you learn things, then you might actually trip up on that old kind of framework in your head of what you actually thought the first time you read it and memorized it. So I would say that more important, definitely character development. But if you want to make a splash and you got a big audition and no one else is going to memorize it, go for it, because I guarantee you they'll remember.
I wonder when the pandemic began, how you felt about your career at that moment. Obviously, Broadway was closed for quite some time. Can you tell us about your feelings and what New York was like at that time?
Man, it was terrifying. The pandemic was so scary. It was the hardest 4 years of my life, even harder than my health crisis. It was my pandemic lasted for 4 full years. I was in The Inheritance. We had just opened on Broadway, and within 2 weeks, we had a notice from our stage manager. I was in the building. They said, "Package stuff. We'll be back on Easter." And because this new coronavirus thing. And we just thought, at first I thought, oh, great, I get 6 weeks off. I get a break. And then 6 weeks became 12, which became 20, which became a year, which became a year and a half. And then it never reopened. We won the Tony on Zoom. We won 4 Tonys on Zoom. We were the best play, best director, 2 best actor awards. We were taking Broadway by storm, and we were on Zoom. No one could see it. And by the time that year and a half passed, funding had dried up, and there was no chance to reopen. So a year and a half of my career, after spending almost 10 straight on Broadway, I'd spent a year and a half without anything. I had to find my first real restaurant job at 36 years old. I had to go into an Australian cafe in the West Village and say, I've never waited tables, but I'm a Broadway actor. I can help you, I guess. And, it was just very humbling. I had to learn how to cater. I had to learn all these new jobs. I started working at a spa. I started working, at these production companies and stuff that I'd never done before, because I'd spent 10 years doing my art and being so fulfilled. And so to lose that creative side and that artistic side of me, it made me lose myself as well. And that's the biggest thing I learned through the pandemic is those two things have to be, mutually exclusive. One of those has to bring the other one up when the other one crumbles, because if they're tied too tightly, they'll bring each other down. And that's what I learned. I learned that my identity was tied up through Broadway. And without Broadway, I didn't have an identity. And so I think the biggest thing for me at the pandemic, and I'm sure a lot can relate to this, is that it gave space where you can take advantage of that space or you can let that space kind of eat you alive. And I think for the first year or two, I let it eat me alive. I didn't know what to do without my beloved Broadway. And then after the 4 years now, I can look back and, now I have this amazing new opportunity with this tour. And, I'm getting here, I'm in my alma mater, talking to you. I mean, all these things can lead. It goes back to what can this do for me? How can this make me stronger? And again, it's just made me a whole new actor, a whole new person.
Now you're currently about halfway through performing in the first national tour of Shucked, which was nominated for the Tony Award for Best Musical. How did the opportunity come about, and what has it been like performing around the country and right here in the DMV?
It is so amazing to be home. It's my first time back since really, we talked about in 2012. So 13 years I've been gone. And I thought when I first went to New York, I'd come back in about 6 months because I'd lose my money or never get a job. The 13 years is crazy to be back. As my dad's still playing at the Kennedy Center. I've always wanted to get in my car and drive to a DC theater and go to work. I've never done that. So this is the first time. Tuesday was the first time I ever got to do that. The DC audiences have been, no joke, the best audiences on tour, and I'm not saying that because I'm biased. They really are. They're a huge, as everyone knows, a huge theater town. They know their theater, and the space is perfect. The National Theater is so intimate, and the front row is like I could touch them. Some of these houses in the middle of America, they're 6,000 people, and the front row is 40 yards away, and it's crazy. So it's so perfect to be back here. The opportunity came. It's a really wild story, but I auditioned before the pandemic in 2019 for what was then called Untitled Country Musical, and I had no idea what it was. I auditioned, I got really close, but I didn't get it. And I didn't get it because I was too old. And I thought, that's fair, whatever, I'll forget about it. And then 2-3 years go by, and then I see it on Broadway. And I talked to the writer, and he was like, oh, yeah, what do you think? He remembered me. I was like, yeah, I really wish I could do it now because, wow, it is really good. It is so, everyone's talking about it. And I'm thinking, wow, that's the one that got away. So lo and behold, 2 years later, I was in my apartment, and my Instagram DM came through from the playwright, the Tony winning playwright, Robert Horn, DM'd me on Instagram and said, you want to go on the road? And I couldn't believe it. I said, for what? And he said, for Shucked. And I said, well, 5 years ago, I was too old. And he goes, well, the cast is older now. I think you fit now. I'll call your agent. And on the next day, my agent called and said, you just got a full offer to play Bo and Shucked on the tour. So it is 5 years between audition, and talk about, a long time between audition and getting the job. That's what this one was. It was a complete life change. Within 2 weeks, my partner and I were on the road. And it's been such a blessing.
As you just shared all that and being back here where it all started for you, Garwood Whaley Auditorium. So if you can tell us what being part of Godspell in 2004 meant to you as you think about this whole journey you've been on and how the people at Bishop Ireton, including Joanna Henry and Chris Tomasino, changed the trajectory of your life.
Oh, completely did. I mean, like I said, it was that feeling of community, feeling of home. All of them gave me the opportunity as a person who had never done anything before. There was plenty of guys that could have played these roles and better than I could. And I was this new green, kind of had no idea what I was doing. There's attributes to that too, but there's a lot of reasons why they could have cast someone else. And they took a risk on me, and then they continue to build me up throughout. Each of them, both Mrs. Henry and Chris, pulled me aside separately and said, you should do this. You got to go to New York. You got to do this for a living. And I never had someone do that. Even as a trumpet player, no one ever said, you could really make it as a trumpet player. I just kind of did it because my parents were. And this is the first time that I felt something that I had ownership of and the agency to think, this is mine. I can do this. I can really learn. And so I really think that if it had been any other school, any other program, any other person, I went on to do multiple productions with Mrs. Henry and Chris outside of school in community theaters and in the Little Theater of Alexandria. I did Into the Woods with both of them. It was just like, it's such a perfect, way to procure a young person's dream and career. These people here, and I think that's a microcosm of the whole community here at Ireton. Dr. Whaley still emails and FaceTimes and Instagrams me. I'm gonna see him when we go down to Florida. I went and stayed at his house a couple of years ago when I went down to Florida. He's still just a dear friend of mine. Mrs. Henry's coming to the show on Saturday. I'm getting lunch with her before. She's probably the number one reason I became an actor. She looked at me and said, she just made me, I wanted to do well for her. I believed in her. She believed in me. And it gave me the energy I needed to succeed.
In the COP broadcast studio here, the sound room, you're walking around the 41,000 square foot building. What was it like before we had a chance to do this podcast, to just walk around and see the old parts of the school that I'm sure bring a lot of nostalgia, and then all the new amazing additions.
Yeah, it's the flooring for me. I was like, oh, I remember this floor, because a lot of the building part is new, but I remember the flooring. I remember the staircase and just driving up that yellow brick on the old part of the Vishbarton school, and then seeing the amazing transformation that it's gone through. I mean, it felt like it was on the verge of that when I was here. It felt like we were on the cusp of it really exploding in every department, and so I'm not surprised at all. And just goes with, like, I knew that this was going to be an amazing place to go to school and to succeed, and I can tell that everyone else feels that too. And so why not expand? Why not build? I'm sure there's more and more students clamoring to get in every year, and I'm sure in 10, 15 years from now it'll be twice the size again, because I think it deserves to be. We need that space, because there's so much going on here that is so valuable that the more the merrier.
You've shared a very inspirational story today with our Ireton community. And I'm wondering, as we went back and forth and told all these stories, what would be maybe the biggest single advice that you would tell? Because I asked you earlier about, students, young alumni, but I want to go to the students for a moment. What's the maybe biggest advice that you would give students today that maybe are just a little bit hesitant to do something outside of their comfort zone, to wrap up what's been so enjoyable being with you today?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I would say, just that. I mean, getting out of your comfort zone is where real growth and change and life happens. That's where you become who you are. And just because if you open a door and it's not the right one, it's going to lead to an infinite amount of other doors. A lot of people tend to think that if you open the wrong door, then you're stuck in some wrong place. But every door leads to another door. You can always go back through the one you came or open the next one, right? And so it's only in your benefit to open as many doors as possible. I try as many things as possible. If you're scared of something but it intrigues you, that's the one you should open. That's what I would say. Because if you get there and it's wrong, okay, then you go through another one. You're not stuck there. But I think as a high schooler specifically, you get caught up in, there's a lot of anxiety and social stigma, and there's colleges, and there's pressure from parents, pressure from teachers, pressure from your peers, and that can lead you to kind of gridlock. And I think you can push through that by doing the thing that seek that discomfort, try and get out of that stuck place by actually seeking out the thing that scares you. If you need a direction, go to the one that's the scariest, because I tell you, if you can just try it one day, you'll learn so much about yourself, and you might see that it's not that scary, or you might see that you're actually good at whatever it is, or you might see that, oh yeah, it's scary, and you can come right back and make a different decision, So I would just say, if you are stuck, if you're questioning, open every door. They're all going to lead to more.
That's Jake Odmark, class of 2004, who fondly remembers his start in the Nest on Cambridge Road, even while his talent on the stage and in life continues to soar. I'm Ryan Fannin, and you've been listening to Bishop Ireton's Real World Wednesdays.